One of the polls that you did recently that made a lot of headlines was on what you call the elite 1%. Can you give us some top lines on what you learned from that?
Sure. The elite 1%, and I won't go through the long story of how we found them, but
please explain who the elite 1% are, at least to begin.
The elite 1% are people who make at least $150,000 a year. They live in a densely populated urban area, more than 10,000 people per square mile, and they have a postgraduate degree. That last one is very important. We hear a lot about the diploma divide, that people with a college degree are more democratic and people. Actually, it's the postgrads who are different. The gap between postgraduates and people with a bachelor's degree is often bigger than the gap between people with a bachelor's and no degree. So that's the elite 1%. They represent 1% of the population. They are extraordinarily influential. They also, heavy concentration of them went to one of 12 elite schools, many of whom have been in the news lately, the schools. And the reason I bring that up is about half the policy positions in government, half the corporate board positions in America are held by people who went to one of these dozen schools. So their views really play a large role in the country, and it all feeds into this elite 1%.
Let me ask you some specific policy-related questions, but just to better understand this group, you said that they are highly influential.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, they know their congressman. They tend to think that if they have an important issue, I can get in and see them and talk about it. Only 15% of Americans have ever met their congressman even once. So they have a direct policy impact.
Okay.
They are in power centers. Somebody who is in Manhattan or Washington, D.C. is in a different circle of public influence than somebody who lives in McKinney, Texas.
So in other words, they're the ones that are shaping the narrative that we are then consuming on a day-to-day
Correct.
basis.
If you're thinking of who's shaping the mainstream media narrative, it's this group.
Okay, so let's get into some of the findings. The biggest headline for me was what this group thinks about the issue of cheating in elections. Can you unpack that one for us?
Sure. We asked 1,000 voters first, suppose there was an election and it was close, but your candidate lost. And if their campaign team knew they could win by cheating and not get caught, would you want them to do so? Now, among voters, only 7% say they'd rather cheat than win. I wish it was 1 or 2, but 7% is not bad. Among the elite 1%, 35% would rather cheat than win. And then among a group that we call the politically obsessed elite, and these are people who are not only in the elite 1%, but they talk politics every day. 69% of them would rather cheat to win the election. And it's because they don't have much respect for the opinions of voters.
I would imagine this group, based on some of the stories I saw, also puts a significant amount of value in government action. Sure. What are their views on government versus the general population?
Well, let's start with a very simple one. Most Americans think we don't have enough individual freedom. Among the elite 1%, about half say, no, we've got too much freedom. And among that politically obsessed group, about 7 out of 10 say there's too much individual freedom in America. I know that's just mind-boggling to me. But part of the reason is because they trust the government. In America, it's been 50 years since most voters trusted the government to do the right thing most of the time. I mean, it's been since 1972. But among the elite 1%, 70% trust the government. Why? Well, partly it's because of what we mentioned earlier. They can get in touch. They can reach out to their congressman or to an agency person. They are the government to a large degree. And it's not a conspiracy. A lot of talk about deep state conspiracies. Truly, it's a sense of a fraternity. We all know each other, and we really don't understand the rest of the country.
Yeah. Government knows best, and the administrative state and others who are in a position of power are there to help make the decisions, so we don't have to.
Right. I would say that this is not a polling interpretation, but when I look at all the data, there's a sense that most of us believe in government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Kind of that formulation. And I think they would say, it's of and by the elites is what's best for the people. I mean, I think that's what, they really believe that if they could just make the decisions and get us out of the way, it'd be a lot better off. Alexander Hamilton thought similar things a long time ago. I mean, there have been people who have had these attitudes. Woodrow Wilson really wrote about the desire for something close to what we have now. So this isn't something new. Some people have always believed that they are destined to rule over others. And America was founded to reject that idea.
Yes.